32 teams in 32 days. This is episode number 17, the Las Vegas Raiders episode. Let's welcome in your boy Q, host of Locked On Raiders. Q, what's going on?
Man, chilling, doing well, man. Appreciate being part of the show, man. Excited about this upcoming draft.
Yeah, excited to have you in. So the Raiders went in a whole new direction this offseason. We talked about this when I had my Vikings guy on this show about the Vikings desperately trying to avoid the rebuild. I'm not quite sure the Raiders or how much better they got this offseason, if they even got better. Do you think they are trying hard to avoid having to rebuild?
Well, yeah, I mean, because they just rebuild. You know what I mean? Like, you can only rebuild and rebuild and rebuild so many times. When John Gruden took over in 2018, he rebuilt. He tore everything down and started to rebuild it in his image. And, I mean, I'll tell you, I'll be 100% honest, and I say this every day on the show, you know, like, they traded Khalil Mack away. They traded Amari Cooper away. They had 5 first-round draft picks in the past couple drafts. And right now what we know is that one guy is a really, really good player in Josh Jacobs, and the rest are still a question mark. So that's a big issue. So, yeah, I mean, they can't say, well, hey, we're going to rebuild again because, well, you already did that. So now it's like now they've got to strike. They've got to get it done. They've got to find the pieces that fit that make this team go. And last year was really unacceptable that they didn't make the playoffs. And I know there was COVID, and I know there was a lot of issues, but everybody dealt with that. They have a very young team, but going 8-8 in year 3 with John Gruden after the rebuild, like I said, is probably not okay. So in 2021, they've got to figure out what pieces they can hit, what pieces they could bring in that can help them get over the top.
Yeah, and you know, they started hot last year. The only real hiccup early on, if I recall, was week 3 against New England. They had some great wins and a really, really tough schedule. Then the train started to collapse in the second half of the season. What happened?
Well, I mean, it's the second year in a row that's happened, you know. I mean, 6-3, 6-4, and then all of a sudden just a collapse, like you mentioned. And again, that goes back on coaching. It goes back on players. I think some of those players got a little excited after they beat Kansas City. And then really, I'll tell you, they lost that second game against Kansas City in Las Vegas, and a game that I was actually at, and they shouldn't have lost. I mean, the defense just collapsed at the end, allowed Kansas City to score. I think that game took so much air out of their win or out of their sails, man. I just think that game just like gutted them. You know, I remember right after the game, John Gruden in the post-game presser was just, I mean, he looked visibly exhausted. Like he had left everything out on the field, and he's not even on the field. It just seems like those guys put everything into that game against Kansas City. And then when they lost, it almost just like popped a balloon or something. It was really strange, but it's the second year in a row they've had late season collapses. So that's something that John Gruden's got to figure out. And that also goes back to the leadership of the players. The players have got to figure out how, if you lose a big game like that, you've got to clear it and come back and realize you still have 7 weeks left. You still have 8 weeks left. You still got a lot of games to play. You can't get hung up on one loss. And so I think that goes to maturity. And that's something that, you know, they brought in some veterans this offseason. I think that's going to help with that maturity and that growth process for those young guys on the team.
So let's talk about John Gruden, right? 10-year contract a couple years ago, going into year 4. And now I've been a believer in, okay, just give him his time, let him get his guys, especially in college football, when guys, you know, don't succeed year 1, they don't have their recruits type of thing. Right. Let it marinate, let him get his guys. Now he had all those draft picks, obviously bringing in Mike Mayock. Hasn't been able to hit on many of them. We think some of them could be good, but the on-the-field success just has not been there. We think the off-the-field stuff, the GM stuff, the stuff with the brass can improve. They can start hitting on these picks because they have 5 picks in the first 4 rounds this year. But the on-the-field stuff, the on-the-field success, in-game management, in-game execution, how does he rewrite the ship? Because if he goes 4 years without making the playoffs, I don't think the Raiders would be impatient to let him go and take up that buyout money.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. You know, Mark Davis loves John Gruden. He really does. I mean, that was somebody that he died, and he really wanted to make sure he was, you know, did everything he could to get him back on the sideline for the Raiders. He got him, gave him that 10-year deal. I don't know the language of the contract. I don't know if after 5 years there's a opt-in or, you know, I mean, I don't know any of that. We all assume it's just a 10-year contract, straight 10-year, but who knows what the language or if there's any outs. I've heard that there's outs in the contract, but either way, I mean, 4 years without the playoffs, like you said, is just unacceptable. So, I mean, he's just got to figure out how to maintain a good team throughout the course of the year. He's got to maintain that if they play well in week 1, they've got to be playing well in week 11 and week 12. And there were some games like Atlanta was one that stood out to me that was just a blowout. You know, they went to Atlanta and just got blown out the water. And there's no reason for that. Atlanta's not very good. I mean, you see they're picking number 4 overall in the draft. So there's no reason why they get blown out by Atlanta. There's no reason that they lose to the Chargers in the end. There's no reason that they lose to the Dolphins late in the game. I mean, there's 2 or 3 games I could pick right now that they should have won and they just lost at the last second of the game. I mean, that's 3 wins right there. It could be 2 or 3 wins, 10 or 11. Then you're talking about the playoffs. So they just got to work together, and this team has just got to improve overall. John Gruden, it starts with him. He's got to look in the mirror and say, hey, how can I improve as a head coach? How can I continue to evolve? I think that him as a head coach is a really good head coach. I think him as a GM is a tough call, and so that's why he brought in Mike Mayock. But we all know it all starts and ends with John Gruden. So Mike Mayock can give him all the feedback he wants, but if it's not, if John Gruden sees that he wants to go in another direction, he's going to go in that direction. And my best example is like Henry Ruggs. That was the number 12 overall pick a year ago. Number 1, first wide receiver taken off the board in the draft. He's a speedster. Okay, well, in 2020, he had 26 catches and like 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's all you used him for 26 catches? Like you went and got all that speed to what? Just have him out there and just run around and not get the ball? I mean, if you're going to get a guy like that, if you're going to go buy a Ferrari, then use it like a Ferrari. Don't use it like a minivan. And so that's been one of my big issues. How does he involve and take a guy like Henry Ruggs and maximize his talent? That's what I think he needs to take his next step in coaching is all the guys he has. He has a lot of talent on the team, how they can all get the most out of their abilities.
Right. And especially adding a 17th game. It's a long season. Yeah. It's a 4.5, 5 month long season with a very long off season. And when you add training camp, OTAs, which are going to happen this year, we all assume, and that stuff's going to happen. Unlike last year, it's even longer. It's, getting the 6, 7.5 month long seasons. When you have a roster with a ton of young players, especially guys, the rookies who didn't go through that last year, right, that can be pretty tough for them to adjust. But I don't know. I guess I have faith in John Gruden to, because this is his second stint coaching. So I think he can write it. He has to though. Like year 4, he has to get it done.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. No doubt. And I don't know what's going to be different between this year and last year. Besides the like you said, training camp, you should have a normal training camp, should have normal OTAs. I think that will be big for the rookies. They didn't have that. So that, they had to kind of learn on the fly. But guys like Damon Arnett, he's got to find out how to stay on the field. I think he's a good player, but he was banged up and injured a lot. He had concussion symptoms all the time. So it's like, how does he stay on the field? How does Henry Ruggs, how do you get the most out of his ability? How do you get a guy like, Tanner Muse, a guy that they grabbed in the 3rd round, never saw the field in 2020. I mean, he was out. So it's like, you have talent. And I think that some of the later round picks are really good picks. They just haven't maximized it yet. Brian Edwards, he didn't really get a whole lot of burn in 2020. If he could step up and play more and get more on the field and get more action, maybe that can help out. I like the fact that they brought in Kenyon Drake. Josh Jacobs is obviously running back 1, but I think that, Kenyon Drake could be 1A. I think that those guys really could complement each other, and really you have a starter on the field at all times instead of going to a backup guy. And these guys are going to push each other as well. These guys, they have egos. They all want to be the top dog. Now these guys are going to push each other. I think that's great. So there's a lot to like about what the Raiders have done. They've just got to figure out, and it starts in OTAs and really right after the draft, figure out how to put it all together, how to mix up the ingredients and actually come out with a really good dinner. I mean, they've got to be able to figure out how to make this team a winner.
Yep. So let's talk about how they kind of reshaped their roster this year. They did make some moves, bringing in Yannick Ngakoue, who has officially turned into a journeyman edge rusher, 4 teams in 3 years. But the Raiders have needed a pass rusher forever. I mean, I go back to trading Khalil Mack. They took Farrell at number 4. What do you think this does for them?
I like it. I've been pounding the table for Ngakoue since he was in Jacksonville. He didn't have to be a journeyman guy. I was like, hey, go make that move for him. Go get him. You need an established guy who can get after the quarterback. And instead he goes to Minnesota, then Baltimore. Now he's with the Raiders. And I think that he's going to come in, provide some leadership. He's back with Gus Bradley, who was his head coach in Jacksonville when he was a rookie. I think Gus Bradley knows how to use him well. Now he doesn't play the run very well, so that could be an issue. But I mean, that he can get after the quarterback. Cleve Farrell, he might be a guy that you end up kicking on the inside, and because he's a lot better against the run than he is against the pass. Max Crosby, he's a guy that, he's very good at getting after the quarterback, but not that good against the run. So, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that you have to mix and put together and figure out what the best combination on the field is. But, I mean, you can never have enough pass rushers. They brought in Solomon Thomas as well. He's a 1-year guy. He'll be in the inside, that 3 technique, playing like he did in Stanford. So, kind of excited about what he could bring, you know, especially coming off that ACL tear. And he, I think he had plenty of time to repair himself and rehab himself and get better. So I think they brought in a lot of competition, a lot of 1-year contracts, 2-year contract guys. So they have to continue to fight. They have to continue to work. They don't just have all of a sudden a great contract where they said, okay, we made it. We're good now. We don't have to worry about, you know, going out there and busting our tail. No, now you got to go out there and earn your next contract. So I think there's going to be a lot of competition in training camp. That's something I'm looking forward to. But I like the addition of Unique Ngakoue a lot, man. He's a player, and the Raiders need some players.
Right. So John Brown comes in, pretty much a swap in for Nelson Aguilar, maybe an upgrade. I mean, I know Aguilar was good for you guys last year, but John Brown's arguably better, got released from Buffalo, surprisingly, a little bit older, but brings more speed, more of a Z type of receiver. What do you think of this move?
I mean, I think it's cool. It's a decent move. Like you said, he got released in Buffalo, kind of surprised by that. He's got a lot of speed. We know that. And we know that the Raiders want to use their speed. But then again, you got to maximize it. Now, Nelly was able to maximize his speed and his ability and turn that into a decent contract in New England. So is John Brown going to be that guy? Maybe, you know, but he's a guy that, to me, he gets injured quite a bit and he's not on the field. You know, he'll go on stretches where he's not on the field enough. And, you know, so he could be, if he's healthy and can stretch the field, then yeah, he could be that guy. I know he does okay with the 50-50 balls. He's not really a guy that's going to go up there and just pry the ball away from a defensive back or a safety. You know, so there's something to like about John Brown. I was saying the whole offseason, like, if Nelson Aguilar is going to demand a pretty big contract, then you got to let him go. And so when I saw the money that he signed for with New England, I thought, yeah, that was a good decision. I mean, he was a 1-year guy. It was a contract year. Fine. No problem. You know, so John Brown's in. We'll see what happens. I'm not like over the moon about the signing, but it's not a bad one, you know?
Right. And you know, I mean, New England was signing anybody with a pulse on day one and day two of free agency. They were giving the corner from Philly, whose name is forgetting me right now. But they Mills. They gave Mills like a 3-4 year contract with like $7-8 million a year. I'm like, this guy has not been good in 3 years. Well, what are you doing? And just a ton of guys just did this. You got guaranteed money, and they brought in Nelson Aguilar. I'm like, he was good, but is he worth $10 million a year? And you know, Vegas probably not paying that. So bring in John Brown, just get more speed out on the field to complement Henry Ruggs. You still have Hunter and from the slot and the speediest tight end there is. So there's that, you know, adding more speed. Jacobs obviously is a speed guy. So yeah, NFL is speed. If you look at KC, you play him twice a year. The NFL is speed. And Tampa got speed with you know, AB slot again. That the name of him is forgetting me, but you know, it's all speed. But I think the story of the offseason for Vegas is selling off their entire offensive line. Richie Incognito left, then came back. Okay. But Gabe Jackson traded, Trent Brown traded, Pro Bowler Rodney Hudson traded. Where did this come from and why did this happen?
Well, they had a very expensive offensive line. And look, I'll tell you like this. It was a shock to me as well. But when you go back and look at it, they had a very expensive offensive line, one of the highest paid offensive lines in the league. And towards the end of the season, we talked about that collapse. They weren't that good. You know, Trent Brown, he only played in 16 games out of 32 with opportunities with the Raiders. So I knew he was going to be gone. He just didn't have the want to. He didn't have the desire to be out there enough. He was out of shape. He just wasn't that guy. When he was out there playing, he was great, but he just wasn't out there enough. You know, he literally played 16 out of 32 possible games with the Raiders. He needs a place like New England. That's where he really did well. I mean, look, he's on his 4th team now. He was drafted by the 49ers. He went to New England, went to the Raiders. Now he's back in New England. They just do things differently, and some guys need a guy to ride them. Trent Brown is a guy that needs someone to ride him. So he's in New England. He'll probably be great, you know, and that's fine. Whatever. No worries. Gabe Jackson, I was actually surprised that he was with the Raiders in 2020 because when he got injured in 2019 and missed a lot of time, and they showed that they could fill that void, no problem. I said, oh yeah, he's going to be on his way out because he's making so much money. But they kept him around for 2020, and then they decided to trade him. And the good thing is they traded him instead of released him, because at first it looked like they were releasing all these guys. It was like, oh man, wait, you got to be able to get something for him. Somebody out there is going to want him. So Seattle goes and makes a move for Gabe Jackson. They get a 5th round pick out of that. Arizona makes a move for Hudson. He gets a 3rd round pick out of that. I mean, that's good. At least they get something in return for the guys that aren't going to be there. Andre James is supposed to be the guy that everyone is expecting to take over the center spot for the Raiders. They're really high on him. He was an undrafted free agent out of UCLA, but they're really, really high on him and think that he's going to do some good things. They also brought in Nick Martin, the center from the Texans, as kind of like competition in camp, but everyone believes that it's going to be Andre James' job to lose. Denzel Good did really well last year in multiple different positions because he had to play the right tackle spot. He had to play the left guard spot. He had to play the right guard spot. I mean, he was all over the place because of injuries, because the guys were out. Think about this. They had such a dominant offensive line, but they literally only played 3 snaps together in 2020. Like the whole unit only played 3 snaps together as a starting offensive line. Then the rest were like fill-in guys here, fill-in guys there, and they still did decent, So Denzel Good, he's expected to take a spot. John Simpson was drafted out of Clemson last year in the 4th round. He's going to take a spot, I'm sure. Richie, like you said, is back, but I think he's going to have some competition in camp. And if someone steps up, maybe they take his spot as well. He's getting older, of course, so life after Richie Incognito is going to come up pretty soon. And then Colton Miller just signed that contract extension, so he's around for the long haul. But everyone else is kind of like competition, and that's okay. As long as the team believes that Tom Cable can get those guys right on the offensive line, I think everything will be okay.
Yeah, and Colt Miller, let's talk about him. Someone who I've always liked coming out of UCLA. He tested off the charts a couple years ago at the Combine. He signed a 3-year, $54 million contract this offseason and 42 guaranteed. That's a lot for Colt Miller, but when you have your left tackle, you have to pay him. And right. We just saw Trent Williams get north of $21 million a year. Tackles get paid. Ronnie Stanley, you signed for all that money, then unfortunately tore his ACL about 6 days later. But when you have your left tackle, you pay him. It doesn't matter how much, because teams budget for left tackles, they budget for quarterbacks, they budget for pass rushers, and it's just a thing in the league that you have to do. And it's not really an overpay. He's a good left tackle. He's still young, but what did you think of this?
Well, I thought it was smart that they got out ahead of it because they really didn't have to. They could have waited a year. And he was actually surprised when he got the deal as well. But the salary cap's a little bit lower right now. So they kind of took advantage of that. They gave him a good deal. I looked at it, and it's funny when you break down the contract details, like his cap hit went up this year and it went up next year, which normally people will say, well, why would you do that? You want to lower a cap hit when you give an extension. But after 2022, he doesn't have any guaranteed money on his contract. Like there's no guaranteed money. So if they wanted to move on from him, they could without a dead cap hit, which I don't think they will, but you just never know how things shake out, So really, I think that they really set this contract up to benefit them in the future, which is fine. I mean, whatever, that's cool as long as they have a game plan on how they're doing it. But clearly this was a contract that they thought about for the future. And I guess if they figured if they waited a year to sign into a contract, then it was going to be even more money, just because, like you said, left tackles are premium. You got to have them, and he's going to get paid. So I guess they got out in front of it, surprised him a little bit, and him and his agent went for it. And so I think that they saved themselves some money in the long run. It just doesn't help them this year as far as like salary cap space. But Colton Miller he's gotten better every year since he's been in the league. I was at that draft in 2015 or 2015 when they got, no, not 2015,
18.
2017, right? 2018. It was the first. He was 2018.
Yeah.
He was Gruden's first pick. That's right. I was at that draft, and it was in Dallas, and I just knew they were going to take Derwin James when they had the opportunity to, and they didn't. And I was like, what in the world are you doing? But hey, what do I know? So it was good. They made the pick. A lot of fans didn't like it, but he's gotten better and better, played through injuries. I think he's only missed 2 games so far in his career. I mean, he's really proven to be a really good pick that when they made that pick, even though a lot of people, including myself, thought it was a crazy pick at the time.
So Raiders have 5 picks in the first 4 rounds, number 17, 48, 79, 80. Have those back-to-back. Very underrated. I love back-to-back picks. And then they have 121 in the 4th round. Now, I can sit here and say that, all those could be linemen. Let's call it a day, right? But, like you said, there are clear competitions on the offensive line. So maybe there's no need to stack up on offensive linemen, but there's obviously plenty of sweet spots to select offensive linemen in this year's draft. The tackle class is tremendous. Do you see them still attacking that position with maybe that extra pick?
Yeah, it's funny. I do. I think that they're going to attack the offensive line a couple times in the course of the draft, and I think at least one will be early. It's funny because on the Locked On NFL Network, the little podcast network that we're on, we did our own mock draft, and I tried to think like the Raiders would think and tried to pick like they would pick. And I'm kind of mad at myself because I ended up going and getting offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech, who's a great player. He's a left tackle, but I think you kick him over to the right side, he'll be fine. So that's who I selected at number 17 for the Raiders. And I think it's a good pick, but I think I could have got more aggressive. I think I could have made like a pick for like a Micah Parsons or a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or someone like that that could be a difference maker along the defense that can help them out, and then go back and address the offensive tackle because, like you said, it's a really deep class. You know, you can get a guy in the second round that maybe has a first round grade, but he's just, because there's so many players that, you know, he ends up dropping to the first round. So I think dropping to the second round, if I had thought about it a little bit longer, I probably would have gone with like a Micah Parsons or a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or someone like that at 17 and then waited on the tackle. But again, if you get a offensive tackle that ends up being your guy for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, then it's not a bad pick either. You know, I mean, Colton Miller just got his second contract. If you get to that second contract, that means that you've gotten a good player. And really, it's crazy, man. Colton Miller was the first Raiders first round draft pick since Darren McFadden to get a second contract with the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good player, but to be that's crazy. I didn't know that.
That's a long time. That's a long time to have a lot of first round picks.
McFadden must have been 15 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, something like that.
I mean, it was quite a while ago, man. That's what's crazy, man. Exactly. He was the year after Jamarcus Russell was picked. So
so that will really McFadden's that old? Because Russell was what, 2004, 2007?
2007, I think. Yep.
So McFadden was 2008. So yeah, 13 years. Wow. Okay. That's crazy. Right. So the defense was really costly last year. You can't reshape a defense in 3 days, but It's a good edge class, a good corner class. Do you see them attacking those positions? Because they brought in Corey Littleton and Nick Kwiatkowski last year. They brought in Carl Joseph, Jonathan Hankins this year, as well as Solomon Thomas. How do you see them addressing the defense in the draft? Because they're going to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that they're going to look maybe at the defensive tackle position. It's a very thin draft for defensive tackles. I think Barmore will probably be the first one off the board. He might go to the first round just because there's so little of them. I don't think he's a first round guy, but I mean, that's not my call. So we'll see what happens. But I think defensive tackle could be addressed. I think corner definitely is going to be addressed. Safety should be addressed, no doubt about it. There's a lot of people that think safety should be the first round pick. You know, Trayvon Merrick from TCU could possibly be the guy at 17. Or if they trade back, he could possibly be a guy like 23 or 24. I know Richie Grant from UCF could be a guy. Javon Holland from UCLA, or not UCLA, from Oregon. Excuse me, Oregon. Yeah, he could be a dude. There's a lot of guys that they can get a little bit later. I've heard a lot of people talk about Andre Cisco out of Syracuse, but coming off the ACL, and I just think he's okay. A lot of people see him because he creates turnovers, but he also gets burned so much. So I'm kind of not okay with that pick. But I mean, there's a lot of different safeties you could choose from, but they'll definitely address the safety position. I think linebacker has to be addressed. I don't think that that's a fix yet. I don't think that corner's a fix yet. Edge rusher, they could always use. I mean, there's really not a guy on defense. If they pick a guy on defense, be like, oh, they don't need that. They actually do. They need a guy all over the field defensively. If they could play with 12 guys on defense, that'd be great. But
yeah, so this is interesting to me because going back in the past Raiders draft, obviously picking 4, they took Clean Farrell. That was the Nick Bosa draft. So Nick Bosa went, then they took Clean Farrell. And then last year they took Henry Ruggs, and they were the first person to take an edge rusher. In 2019 with Farrell, everyone knew that Bosa was going to be gone, and people still thought, okay, they might take an edge rusher. That was the year where like Clemson had 3 guys. They had Lawrence, they had Farrell, of course, and they had everyone. And then the line that year, or the defensive line class that year was very, very good, and Raiders took one. Last year with Ruggs, obviously great receiver class. They took the player who they thought was the best. Could you see them maybe? So in the past, I'm like, this is where I'm going with this. They have taken, the top guy who is their guy. Do you see them potentially, like, if one of the 3 top corners, Horn, Farley, and then Surtain, if one of those guys fall to 17, could you see them going like, okay, this guy's might not be at the top of our board, but he's a premium position at a premium pick, and we can go that direction?
Oh yeah, and that's what they should do. If a Surtain were to fall, I mean, look, I've been talking, my conversations have been, if a Surtain gets to 12 or 13, you got to be on the phone trying to trade up and go get him. Like, why not? You know, I mean, you have Damon Arnett and Trayvon Mullen. Neither one of those guys have solidified themselves as a lockdown corner. I think Surtain's going to be a lockdown corner. I think J.C. Horn has an opportunity to be a lockdown corner. Farley, I'm a little gun shy on only because of the injuries and the back injuries. And I don't think that the Raiders are a team that are allowed the luxury to go and get a guy that's been injured and say, well, you know, he checked out medically, so he should be okay. I just don't think that they could take a chance like that just because of their track record. But, you know, somebody's going to get a really good defensive back. I don't know if it's going to work out with them or whatever. I just kind of, I keep them off my first round pick, my board, just because of those injuries. But I know someone's going to take a chance on them, probably get them pretty early. But yeah, those three guys, man, those are big time defensive backs right there. And the Raiders need one. You know, and I know they picked Damon Arnett with the number 19 overall pick last year, corner out of Ohio State. But like I said, he couldn't stay on the field. So he's a guy that, yeah, you like him. You like what he brings to the table, but you also like the fact that he's got to be on the field to play, you know? And so I think that if you have an opportunity to go get any of those difference makers at the top of the draft, regardless if it's not really the biggest need that you have, you better go do it, you know? And that even goes, like I said before, to like a Micah Parsons or a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. If you think that guy's the difference maker on your defense, go get him. Go get them and figure it out later. You know, the good teams, they go and draft really good players and figure out exactly how they're gonna make it work later with the talent that they already have on the roster. But they just know that they got another dog on defense or a dog on the team. And so I think that's what the Raiders need. They need more difference makers. You look up and down that lineup, there's not enough difference makers. There's not enough guys that opposing offenses and offensive coordinators say, okay, we got to prepare to try to stop that guy. I don't see that guy on the squad. I don't. And that's the problem. That's who Khalil Mack used to be. He used to be the guy that people say, okay, stop 52 and make everybody else beat you. Now you look at the Raiders and say, okay, cool. No problem. We got this.
So, before I let you go, I do this to everyone who comes on. You're John Gruden. You're Mike Mayock. You're in the chair at pick 17. I'll give you a couple of guys who are there. Let's say Kumaro is there. I just call him Jock, honestly.
Right.
Let's say Jock is there.
Okay.
Parsons isn't there.
Okay.
Farley and Horn are there, and Azeez Ojulari and Kwity Paye are both there. Who's your pick? And if someone else asks me if he's there, and I'll tell you if he is or not.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with J.C. Horn. I'm going to go with J.C. Horn. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to go run up to the podium and I'll go get J.C. Horn and I'll put him in competition with Damon Arnett and Trayvon Mullen. May the best man hold down one spot. May the best man hold down another slot. Maybe Damon Arnett moves to the slot, but either way you look at it, you got a lot of talent at the corner position. Gus Bradley. I look at Gus Bradley and say, hey man, you're about to be a happy dude, you know, defensive coordinator with a long, especially Horn. He's a long, rangy Seattle Seahawk type DB. And that's what we always said that everyone was looking for after the Legion of Boom became so popular. You got to go get a Seattle Seahawk type defensive back. Well, that's who J.C. Horn is. So yeah, I would be all for that. I would do a backflip all the way up to the podium. And I'm not even a gymnast, but I would do it.
No, that's a really good point. The one thing that I always remember from like the downfall, not downfall, but the beginning of the end for Seattle is when Miami gave Byron Maxwell that contract. I don't know if you remember, but it was like a 4-year deal with like 40, 50, like they gave him double-digit $1 million, and I was like, Byron Maxwell's not that good. He's not that good. He's old.
Yep.
Like so, like they want, like people wanted those corners. They wanted those DBs. Obviously, Earl Thomas bounced around a couple teams and is out of league now. But
lots of guys got jobs because of that Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom team. I mean, coaches included, Gus Bradley included. He became a head coach. You know, Dan Quinn became a head coach. Ken Norton Jr., defensive coordinator. I mean, all these guys got a lot of jobs based off of the Legion of Boom.
And, you know, Pete Carroll, it's funny because I think he did a horrible job last year, and I like Pete Carroll. I'm a Pete Carroll guy. But he's safe because of what happened in 2013. And, you know, Sean Payton's still hanging on to 2009. These teams in the NFC or AFC too who have tenure, who hang on to that one run, and, you know, it didn't work for Doug Peterson in Philly because Philly's a lot more impatient. But Pete Carroll's job is safe because of what happened 7 years ago, and that's just how the league works. But Q, man, thanks so much for coming on. You were great.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it, man. Anytime you guys need me, you let me know.
Everyone make sure to follow him on Twitter at yourboyQ254. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of 32 Teams in 32 Days. And I'll catch you in the next one.